In the endless galaxy there are many kingdoms, many empires and many rulers. Some are strong with weapons, some are wise with knowledge, and some are cruel with pride. Among them was an empire known for its warriors, for its bloodline and for its unbreakable honor. They believed strength was everything, and weakness was shame. Into this empire a princess was born, but not like the others. Her name was whispered in fear, not respect. She was born with a disability, her body not as strong as other royals. She could not walk with speed. She could not fight with blades, and her hands sometimes trembled. From her first breath, the empire decided her fate. They called her broken. They called her cursed. Even when she smiled as a child, they turned their faces away. The empire had a sacred tradition. Every royal must form a bond, a link of mind and spirit with another of their kind. A bond gave power, respect, and future leadership. But when the time came for the princess to bond, no one came forward. Nobles looked away, warriors laughed in secret. They whispered, "Why bond with weakness? Why carry her shame?" The princess tried to hide her pain. She sat alone in the great halls while others celebrated. She listened to the footsteps fade as suitors chose other royals. Her heart broke in silence, but her face showed calm. Inside, she felt like a shadow in her own palace. Every night she asked the stars one question: why was I born like this? Rumors spread like fire. The council of elders spoke of removing her from the line of succession. Some even spoke of sending her away to a distant moon. The people cheered the idea, not out of hate, but out of pride. For them, weakness had no place on the throne. The princess heard these whispers, and each word cut her deeper than a blade. But fate was not finished one day. Far from the empire's center, a small human ship landed. Humans were seen as young, simple, and weak by the great alien races. They had no empire, no glory, only fragile bodies and fragile lives. Most saw them as children playing in a galaxy of giants. But this human was different. He was an explorer, curious and bold. He did not come with soldiers or gifts. He came with open eyes. He watched the empire's ways, the proud warriors, the shining palaces, the cruel laughter. And then he saw her, a lonely figure in the corner of a grand hall, dressed in royal cloth but ignored like dust. Her eyes carried sorrow deeper than the void between stars. The human did not laugh. He did not turn away. Instead, he wondered, why does no one sit with her? Why does no one speak her name? He asked the servants, and they mocked him. She is the broken princess. She is nothing. She will never be queen. But the human did not agree. That night, while the palace feasted in golden light, the human walked in the shadows. He found the princess sitting alone by a window. Watching the stars, her face was calm, but her hands trembled, her eyes wet with hidden tears. For a moment neither spoke, then the human said softly, "The stars are beautiful tonight." The princess turned in shock. No one had spoken to her with kindness in years. She whispered, "Why are you here?" "You should be with the others." The human smiled. "Because I would rather sit here." His words were simple, but to her they felt like a storm breaking the silence. Her heart beat faster, not from fear, but from something she thought was lost. Hope. But outside the chamber the whispers grew louder. The nobles saw the human's glance, the princess's faint smile. They hissed, "How dare a human look at her? How dare he speak to a royal?" They laughed cruelly. Maybe only a human is foolish enough to bond with weakness. But deep in the shadows of fate, a fire had been lit, a fire that would burn brighter than all their pride. The princess did not know it yet. The human did not know it yet, but this small act, this quiet moment by the window, would change the empire forever. Because sometimes, the greatest strength is found in those who are called weak. And sometimes, the greatest courage is to see value where others see shame. And in the silence of the night, the stars above seemed to listen. They shined brighter, as if waiting for the story to begin. The human ship was small compared to the shining vessels of the empire. Its metal was plain, its engines weak, and its design looked almost fragile. Yet inside it walked a man with steady steps and sharp eyes. He was not a warrior, not a prince, and not a noble. He was simply an explorer, a seeker of stories and stars. When he arrived at the empire's gates, the guards laughed. They said, "A human, what use is he here? His bones will break if we raise our voices." But the human bowed with calm respect and asked for passage. He wanted to learn, he wanted to see, and he wanted to understand the proud people of this land. Though mocked, he was allowed in, for humans were harmless in the eyes of giants. He watched the grand city with wonder. Towers of silver rose like mountains glowing with alien lights. Bridges connected palaces that seemed to float in the sky. Everywhere he looked, warriors carried weapons. Nobles carried pride, and all eyes carried disdain whenever they saw him. But the human did not feel shame. He walked with quiet strength. For he had seen worlds where kindness mattered more than power. He had crossed empty voids with nothing but his will. He believed every being deserved respect, no matter how weak others thought they were. On his second night in the Empire, he was invited to a royal gathering. The hall was filled with music, bright colors and endless laughter. Princes and princesses sat in circles, boasting of victories, comparing scars. Bondmates stood proudly beside them, their strength glowing like fire. And yet, in the farthest corner, sat the princess forgotten by all. She wore the royal cloth, but her chair was low and placed near the shadows. No warriors stood beside her. No nobles offered their hand. It was as if she were invisible, a ghost among the living. The human's heart tightened at the sight. He wondered how a people so proud could treat their own bloodline with such cruelty. He asked a noble standing near, "Why does she sit alone?" The noble sneered, "That is the broken one, the shame of the empire." The human frowned. "She is still a princess," the noble laughed. "A title means nothing when the body is weak. Her name is cursed. None will bond with her." The human felt anger, but he held his tongue. When the feast ended, the music faded and the hall grew quiet. The nobles and warriors left in groups, leaving the princess alone. The human stayed behind, his steps light, his eyes fixed on her. He saw her lean on her trembling hands, saw her shoulders heavy with silence. He thought of his own people, who had once been called weak by greater races, and he thought maybe weakness was not weakness at all. He walked slowly to her side. She turned her face toward him, her eyes cautious, her lips silent. No one had dared to approach her without insult for many years. The human spoke softly. "The stars outside are brighter than this hall." The princess blinked in surprise. His words strange yet gentle, she asked, "Why do you come here? Do you not fear my curse?" The human smiled. "I do not see a curse. I see a person." The princess's breath caught, her heart uncertain. No one had spoken to her as if she mattered. "Not since she was a child," she whispered. "Others laugh when they look at me." The human's voice was steady. "Then they do not know how to see." In that moment, something unseen moved between them. Not the formal bond of power her people valued, but a spark of recognition, a spark of shared truth. The princess lowered her eyes, afraid of hope, yet unable to stop the warmth growing inside her. The human simply sat beside her, silent, as if silence itself could protect her from the world. Outside the hall, servants whispered in anger. They saw the human sitting with the princess, and their voices spread like wildfire. "Look at him. The fool dares to sit with the broken one. Only a human would waste time with weakness. Perhaps he is desperate. Perhaps he seeks pity." But the human did not care for whispers, and the princess, for the first time in years, felt less alone. She looked at him and saw not pity, but truth, for his eyes carried no judgment. Only a strange strength she had never known. A strength that came not from the body, but from the heart. That night, when the palace slept, the princess thought of him. She remembered his words, his smile, his steady gaze. And though she tried to push the feeling away, her heart whispered, "He sees me." For the first time since her birth, she dreamed not of rejection but of possibility, and the stars outside her window seemed to shine brighter, as if the universe itself was waiting for what would come next. The days after the feast passed slowly for the princess. She stayed in her quiet chamber away from the grand halls. The walls around her were tall and painted with stars, yet to her they felt like a cage. Every sound of laughter from outside reminded her of her isolation. She told herself she did not care, but her heart betrayed her. It longed for a single voice of kindness. Then one evening, as the twin moons rose above the palace, she heard footsteps. They were softer than the boots of guards, lighter than the steps of nobles. The door opened gently, not with the loud pride of her people, but with care. The human stood there, holding a small tray of food. It was simple, bread and fruit. Nothing like the empire's feasts, yet he carried it as if it were treasure. The princess frowned. "Why do you come here?" Her voice was sharp, though weak from silence. The human bowed slightly. "Because you should not eat alone." She looked away. I am used to it, he shook his head. That does not mean it is right. For a long moment, she said nothing. Her eyes studied him. This fragile-looking man with no title, no strength. Why would he risk shame just to sit near her? Her people mocked weakness, yet he seemed unafraid. At last she sighed. Very well. Sit. The human placed the tray between them. He spoke of small things, of stars he had seen, of worlds he had walked. She listened in silence at first, afraid to trust his words, but slowly. His voice eased her heart. It was steady, calm, like a river flowing through her empty halls. When she finally spoke, her words were heavy with doubt. Why do you not laugh at me? Why do you not call me broken? The human looked directly into her eyes. Because you are not broken. She trembled. Unused to such certainty, her voice cracked. But I cannot fight, I cannot lead. I cannot even walk without pain, he answered softly. You can still think, you can still feel, you can still choose. That is not weakness. The princess lowered her gaze. Tears gathering, her people saw only what she lacked. But this human spoke of what she still had. For the first time, she felt the weight of shame lift. If only slightly, a small light grew within her. Fragile, but real. Night after night he returned, sometimes with food, sometimes with stories, sometimes only with silence. They would sit together by the window. Watching the stars beyond, she told him of her childhood, of being hidden behind curtains while her siblings trained. She told him of the cruel laughter, of the day her father refused to look at her during council. Each memory was a scar, and yet he listened to them all without turning away. In return, he spoke of earth, of oceans that stretched forever, of forests full of life, of skies painted by storms. He told her of people who stumbled, fell, but rose again with greater strength. He said, on earth some are born different. Some cannot run or fight, yet their hearts shine brighter than the strongest warrior. The princess whispered, do you mean I could shine too? His answer was firm, you already do. The bond began not with power, but with trust, not with glowing energy as the empire expected, but with gentle understanding. When she laughed at his clumsy attempt to imitate alien customs, her chest felt lighter. When he smiled at her without pity, her soul felt steadier. It was not the bond her people spoke of, yet it was something greater. But outside the chamber, whispers grew. Servants noticed the human's visits. Guards reported his steps. Rumors spread through the palace halls like fire. The human dares to spend time with the broken one. Perhaps he pities her. Perhaps he seeks to mock the empire. Others hissed darker words. If a bond forms, it will bring dishonor to us all. The princess knew the danger. She told him one night, if they discover you come here, they will cast you out. Or worse, the human's reply was calm. Then let them. I would rather be cast out for kindness than praised for cruelty. Her heart trembled at his courage. She thought perhaps weakness was not in her body, but in the hearts of those who feared to care. That night, as they sat in silence, the air between them grew warm. She felt it, a pulse deep within her, faint but real, the first spark of a bond. Not of tradition, not of power, but of choice. Her people would never understand, but her heart did, for the first time. She did not feel cursed, she felt alive, and somewhere beyond the palace walls. The stars burned brighter, as if they knew a new story had begun, a story that would challenge pride, shatter old traditions, and awaken a fire long hidden. The broken princess was no longer alone, for a human, fragile yet fearless, had dared to see her, and in that daring, destiny itself had shifted. The bond between the princess and the human grew stronger with every passing night. It was not the official bond of her people, not the sacred link of power that nobles respected. It was a bond of trust, of gentle words, of silent company that needed no explanation. The princess began to smile again, not the false smile she wore for the court, but a true smile that lit her face. The human began to feel a warmth he had never known before, a purpose deeper than wandering the stars. But in a palace built on pride, nothing stayed hidden for long. The guards saw the human steps too often near her chamber. The servants whispered about the quiet laughter that escaped her room. The nobles sneered when they saw her eyes glowing faintly after his visits. For in their empire, bonds carried energy, and some had begun to notice a strange spark around the princess. One night when the human entered her chamber, the princess's hands trembled. Her eyes showed both joy and fear. They are speaking of us, she whispered. They say you dare to touch what is forbidden. The human placed the food down gently and sat beside her. "Let them speak," he said calmly. "Words cannot change truth." But she shook her head, her voice breaking. "You do not understand. In my people's law, if an outsider bonds with a royal, it is treason. It is punishable by death." The human's face did not change, his eyes steady as ever. "And yet here I am," he said softly, "because I choose to be." Her heart ached at his words, torn between fear for him and longing for herself. That night, as the stars shined beyond the window, it happened. She felt his hand brush hers, not by accident, but by choice. Her body froze, yet her spirit surged. Between them a glow formed, faint and trembling like the first fire of dawn. It was not the same as the bonds of the Empire. It was something older, purer, something the elders had forgotten. The princess gasped. "It cannot be," but the human only whispered, "It is real." The glow wrapped around them, threads of light binding heart to heart. Not flesh to flesh, she felt his strength enter her. Not the strength of muscle, but the strength of courage, of endurance, of belief. For the first time, she stood without her cane, her legs shaking yet holding. Tears filled her eyes as she whispered, "I am not broken." The human smiled. "You were never broken." Their bond was sealed, not by ritual but by choice, and that made it stronger than any empire could imagine. But outside her chamber, shadows listened. A servant had seen the glow, had heard the whispers, and ran to the nobles with the tale. By dawn, the court was alive with fury. "The human has defiled our tradition," they cried. "The broken princess has betrayed her bloodline," they hissed. "Such shame cannot be allowed," thundered the council. When the princess entered the great hall the next day, silence fell. The human walked beside her, calm though every eye burned with hate. The emperor himself sat on the throne, his face carved from stone, his voice like thunder. "Daughter, explain what I hear," he demanded. The princess bowed her head, her voice steady. "It is true. He has bonded with me." The hall exploded with outrage. Warriors shouted for punishment. Nobles demanded exile. Priests called for cleansing. But the human raised his voice, not loud but firm. "I did not take her bond. She gave it freely, and I gave mine in return." His words echoed through the hall, strange in their simplicity, powerful in their truth. The emperor's eyes narrowed. "You are a human, a fragile being with no place in our line. How dare you claim a bond?" The human bowed but did not tremble, because strength is not decided by race nor by law. It is decided by the heart. The nobles laughed. Their voices cruel, how childish, how human. But the princess lifted her head, and for the first time her voice rang clear. "He speaks truth, and I will no longer be silent." Gasps filled the hall, for never before had she spoken against the court. Her words carried not the weakness they mocked, but the fire of defiance, and though many jeered, though many demanded her punishment, a few watched in silence. A few saw the glow of the bond and felt something they had not felt in years. Doubt. Doubt that perhaps their laws had blinded them. Doubt that perhaps strength wore many forms, but the empire was not ready to change. Not yet. The emperor rose and declared, "If this bond is real, then let it be tested," his voice thundered. "She and her human shall face the trial of strength. If they fail, they will be cast into the void. If they succeed, only then will I consider their bond." The princess's heart pounded, fear and fire burning together. The human placed a hand on her shoulder and whispered, "We will not fail." The hall shook with the sound of drums. The trial was set, the challenge awaited, and in the silence of the night the princess stood by her window once more. But this time she was not alone, for by her side stood a human who dared the impossible. And together, their forbidden bond had become the spark that could either save them or destroy them. The empire did not waste time. When the emperor declared the trial, the news spread across the city like fire. Crowds gathered from every corner, eager to watch the shame of the broken princess and her foolish human. For them, the trial was not justice. It was entertainment. They wanted to see her fail. They wanted to see him crushed. No one believed they could stand against the chosen warriors. The arena was carved into the heart of the city. A circle of black stone wide enough to hold armies. High walls rose around it with seats filled by nobles. Soldiers and commoners. Drums thundered as the gates opened. The princess walked slowly, her cane in hand, the human at her side. The crowd booed, laughed, and shouted curses. "Look at her! The broken one!" they jeered. "Look at him!" The fragile human, The princess's heart trembled, but she did not let it show. The human's hand brushed hers for only a moment, steadying her. "Remember," he whispered, "we are not here to be like them. We are here to be ourselves." She nodded, her fear folding into determination. For the first time, she wanted to fight not for the Empire's respect, but for her own truth. From the opposite gate came their challengers. 3 warriors chosen by the council, strong and merciless. One carried a blade taller than the human. Another bore claws sharpened to cut stone. The last was a giant armored from head to toe, his strength legendary in the Empire. The crowd roared as the warriors raised their weapons. No one doubted the outcome. They expected blood and defeat. The drums fell silent, the air grew heavy. The Emperor's voice rang across the arena. "The trial begins. Let truth decide their fate." At once, the warriors charged, their steps shaking the ground. The princess felt her legs weaken, fear gripping her chest. But the human stepped forward, his voice calm. "Stand with me." He had no weapon, no armor, only courage. He dodged the first strike, rolling across the ground as the giant's blade crashed into stone. The crowd gasped, for the human moved with speed they did not expect. He shouted to the princess, "Use your mind. Guide me." Her eyes widened, but then she saw the pattern of their enemies. She realized strength was not only in muscles, it was in seeing, in thinking, in guiding. When the clawed warrior leaped, she cried out, "Left!" The human ducked just in time, the claws slicing empty air. When the giant lifted his weapon again, she whispered, "Step back now." He moved, and the blade struck the ground where he had stood. The crowd murmured in surprise. The broken princess was not fighting with her body, but with her mind, and together they moved as one. Yet the warriors were ruthless. The second blow struck the human's shoulder, sending him stumbling, blood staining his sleeve. The princess's heart screamed, "Enough!" Something inside her snapped, and the glow of their bond flared bright. Her cane trembled in her hand, and for the first time, she felt strength flow into her legs. Not perfect, not whole, but enough to stand. Enough to step, enough to fight. She raised her cane like a staff, the glow wrapping it in light. The crowd gasped as she struck forward, forcing the clawed warrior back. The human, bleeding but smiling, laughed. "Yes, that's it. Stand with me." Together they faced the storm. He blocked with bare hands and desperate courage. She struck with sudden bursts of light and quick guidance. Every time he fell, she pulled him up with her voice. Her will, her bond. The warriors grew frustrated. They expected weakness but found resistance. The crowd that once mocked now sat in silence, watching with wide eyes. The Emperor himself leaned forward on his throne, his stone face cracking with doubt. The princess shouted, "We are not broken," her voice echoing across the arena. The bond between her and the human blazed like fire, unseen threads weaving their spirits as one at last. The giant warrior roared and swung with all his strength. The human pushed the princess aside and caught the blow with both arms. The stone floor shattered beneath him. Pain shot through his body, but he did not let go. The princess raised her glowing cane and struck the giant's chest. Light exploded, sending the armored warrior crashing to the ground. Silence fell. The impossible had happened. The clawed warrior and the second fighter froze. Fear in their eyes. For the first time they saw the truth. The bond was real, and it gave more strength than any tradition. The Emperor raised his hand and the drum stopped. His voice thundered, "Enough! The trial is decided." The crowd erupted, some in anger, some in awe, some in confusion. But one thing was clear. The broken princess and the fragile human had stood against warriors and had not fallen. In that moment, the Empire itself trembled. For what they saw could not be denied. Weakness had fought, courage had endured, and together, they had proved a new kind of strength. The trial of strength had ended, but the true battle was only beginning. And as the human stood beside the princess, blood on his arms, fire in his eyes, she whispered, "We are not alone anymore." The stars above seemed to burn brighter, waiting for what would come next. The arena still shook with the echoes of the trial. The dust of battle hung in the air. The black stone floor cracked where blades had struck. The princess leaned on her glowing cane, her chest rising and falling with exhaustion. Beside her stood the human, bleeding from his arms and shoulders. Yet his eyes burned with steady fire. They had survived the impossible, but survival was not victory. The Emperor rose slowly from his throne, his cloak flowing behind him like a storm cloud. His voice cut through the silence. "You have faced the trial, yet this does not prove your bond is worthy. The crowd cheered at his words, eager to see more suffering, eager to see the pair fall. The princess lifted her head, her voice trembling but firm. We fought with truth. We fought as one. But the nobles hissed. It was chance, it was trickery. The human only delayed their death. The emperor's eyes narrowed at the human. You should have broken, you should have begged. Yet you stood, why? The human wiped the blood from his face, his voice calm. Because I chose to stand. Because courage is not the absence of fear. It is the refusal to kneel. A murmur rippled through the court. The words struck deeper than any blade. But prideful hearts would not yield so easily. The council demanded another test. Let the human face the gauntlet alone, they cried. Let us see if he truly holds courage or only borrowed strength. The princess's heart froze. She stepped forward. No, he cannot. He is already hurt. But the human placed a hand on her shoulder, his smile soft but unshaken. I will go, he whispered, because if I do not, they will never believe. The gauntlet was not meant for mortals. It was a path lined with fire traps, spinning blades and beasts bred only for war. Even warriors of the empire trained for years before daring to enter. Yet the human walked to its gate with no armor. No weapon, only his will. The princess clutched her cane, her voice breaking. Please, you will die. But he looked at her with steady eyes. If I fall, let it be known I fell for truth. Not for pride. The drums thundered again. The gate opened. The human stepped inside. The crowd roared, some with laughter, some with disbelief. The first trap came at once. A wall of fire shot across his path. He shielded his face and ran through, his skin burning but his steps never slowing. The crowd gasped, for he did not scream, he did not stop. Next came the spinning blades, metal shining with deadly speed. He studied their rhythm, his breath steady, then leaped. The edge cut his leg, blood streamed down, but he rolled and stood again. His body shook, but his eyes never wavered. The nobles muttered, impossible, a human should be broken by now. From the shadows, a beast emerged, jaws wide, eyes glowing. It was bred to crush bone, trained to smell fear. The princess gripped the edge of her seat, her heart racing. The human faced the creature with nothing but his bare hands. When it lunged, he did not run, he stepped aside, grabbing a broken shard of stone. With a roar, he struck its side again and again. Until the beast stumbled back, the crowd erupted in shock, their laughter fading into uneasy silence. The princess's hands trembled. Her bond with him pulsed with each heartbeat. She felt his pain, his exhaustion, yet also his unyielding will. Tears filled her eyes as she whispered, please come back to me. Inside the gauntlet, the human pressed forward, limping, bleeding, but still moving. He reached the final chamber, where a single path led upward to light. The emperor leaned forward, expecting collapse, but the human climbed. One step at a time, his breath ragged, his body failing. Each step echoed across the arena, each step louder than 1,000 words. When at last he emerged into the light, the arena fell silent. No one could speak, for they had seen what should have been impossible. The emperor's voice thundered again, though quieter now. You are no warrior, yet you endured where even our strongest have fallen. The human bowed, his voice hoarse but clear, because courage is not in blood. It is in choice. The words struck like lightning. The nobles shifted uncomfortably. The soldiers stared in silence. Even the priests lowered their eyes. The princess rushed to his side, tears running down her face. You fool, she whispered. You could have died. He smiled weakly. But I didn't, because I promised you we would not fail. Her heart broke and healed at the same time, her bond with him glowing brighter than ever. She realized then that his courage was not just his own. It had given her courage too. The emperor raised a hand, silencing the court. Perhaps this bond is more than weakness. Perhaps there is truth in what we see. The crowd murmured, half in anger, half in awe. For the first time in history, a human had stood before the empire and had not bent. The princess stood beside him, lifting his arm in defiance, and in that moment, the broken and the fragile had become unbreakable. The arena had never been so quiet. The crowd that once mocked now sat frozen, their voices caught in their throats. They had watched a human bleed, stumble, and still stand. They had seen the broken princess strike with fire born of courage. And deep inside their hearts, even the most prideful felt a spark of doubt. The emperor stood tall upon his throne. His face shadowed, his voice was calm but heavy. The trial has ended, the gauntlet has ended. Yet the question remains, can this bond change what we are? Can this bond lead where only strength has led before? The council shouted in protest. It is shame, it is danger, it is poison to tradition. But their words no longer carried the same weight. Too many eyes had seen too much. The princess stepped forward, leaning on her glowing cane. Her voice shook, but she forced it steady. All my life I was called weak, cursed, unworthy of the throne. The hall echoed with silence, every noble listening, though many wished not to. But weakness was never in my body. It was in the hearts that refused to see. She turned toward the human, her eyes fierce. He saw what none of you dared to see. He gave me the courage you all tried to steal. The human stepped beside her, his face pale with pain but his eyes unbroken. He spoke simply, "Strength is not the size of your arm, nor the sharpness of your blade. Strength is the will to rise when the world pushes you down." His words rang across the chamber, strange and soft, yet sharper than any weapon. The nobles sneered, but some soldiers lowered their heads ashamed. Even a few council members shifted uneasily, for truth cut deeper than pride. One noble rose, his voice trembling with fury. "Will you let a human teach us who we are? Will you let a broken princess shame us before the stars?" The human turned to him calmly. "You call her broken, yet she stood where others would have fallen. You call me fragile, yet I endured where others fled. Tell me then, who truly carries shame?" The noble sat down, his mouth dry, his pride cracked. The emperor's eyes narrowed, testing them with silence. At last he asked, "Why? Why risk your life for her? You gain nothing, no throne, no power, no wealth." The human's answer was simple. "Because she is worthy, because every life is worthy, and no law will tell me otherwise." The word struck the court like thunder. It was not the speech of a conqueror, not the boast of a warrior, but the truth of a heart unafraid. The princess raised her cane high, the glow spreading through the hall. "Look," she cried, "the bond is real, not forged of fear or duty, but of choice." Threads of light shimmered around her and the human, binding them together before all eyes. It was undeniable, their spirits were linked. Their strength shared, the crowd gasped. Not with mockery, but with awe. Even the emperor's face softened, though his pride still held him silent. Then something unexpected happened. Among the soldiers in the crowd, one stepped forward. He knelt on the stone floor, lowering his head. Another followed, then another, until a small wave of warriors bowed before the princess. Their voices carried through the chamber. "We see truth." It was not many, but it was enough to shake the pillars of tradition. The council erupted in chaos. Shouting and cursing, some demanded punishment. Others demanded exile. But the emperor raised his hand, and silence fell again. He looked at his daughter long and hard. For the first time since her birth, he did not see a curse. He saw fire. Fire lit not by strength of body, but by the courage of spirit. He turned to the human, his voice heavy. "You have broken our laws, yet you have shown us something even law cannot deny." The human bowed. "I broke no truth, I only followed it." The emperor's lips pressed tight. Torn between pride and revelation, the hall waited, breaths held, the weight of centuries hanging in the balance. Finally, the emperor spoke. "Perhaps strength is not what we believed. Perhaps it is more." Gasps filled the chamber, for never had he questioned the law before. The council shouted again, desperate to hold the old ways. But their voices were weaker now. Too many had seen courage in human form. Too many had seen light in the broken princess. The princess stepped closer to her father. Her voice was steady. "I will not kneel to shame any longer. I will not hide behind your silence. If you cast me out, so be it, but I will not call myself broken." The hall fell silent. The empire itself seemed to hold its breath, and for the first time, nobles and soldiers alike wondered if the future would no longer belong to pride, but to courage.